Hi, and welcome to Denny Talk. Grace and I, Hun, interview faculty members and student leaders to explore different majors and disciplines while making networking less intimidating. Today we're welcoming Steve from the Red Frame Lab.
We've had a lot of students with a lot of good entrepreneurial ideas, new business ideas. Also heard a lot of them that are not so good. I would say one of my favorites was called Kid Caddy, and the idea was kind of think of it like an Uber that a parent would hire to take their kid to school, from school, to an event. And you might think, who in the world is going to put their kid in the car of a stranger? But we were asking the same question when Uber first came about. Who in the world is going to get into some stranger's car to go somewhere? And this student was way ahead of everybody thinking about how to make that work. She really had a great plan. And so you have trusted, validated, verified, researched drivers, and not to mention the fact that you'd have a regular pool of drivers. And if you talk to anybody in this town who has to drop their kid off at school or pick their kid up at school, it takes so much time. So such a good idea, so much demand in an area like this one. And she's actually prototyped it and taken it somewhere. But Kid Caddy was just let somebody else take your kid to and from their events. Brilliant idea. I was an engineer for 25 years and got to do the coolest work. I got to work on some really, really cool projects, stuff that just was blowing my brain every day. Very difficult work. I really enjoyed that challenge. In fact, I kind of miss it, but I always wanted to get into education. Even when I was an undergrad, I was on that fence between education and engineering, and it was all the other things I wanted to do with my life that pushed me in the engineering direction first. I was always volunteering in schools while I was an engineer. I loved doing that. I got to do a really cool project in education one time that my company was doing, and that's where I met a whole bunch of people in this area. And I found out there was a way for me to get into education, and it was through consulting. So I actually became an education consultant, and I left my job after 25 years. Some people thought I was crazy to do it, to leave that what looked like security. It wasn't really security, but it looked like it, and try something entirely new. And I was really glad I did. It was really fun. I got to travel the world doing education consulting. I got to go to Egypt 26 times. I got to go to Kazakhstan, China, Chile, and a whole bunch of states across the US doing this kind of work, bringing the engineering mindset to education design. And then I got an email from somebody that said, hey, we're creating this thing at Denison, and it's going to be kind of a design lab, and we're looking for a part-time person to start this thing for us, and I think you might be an interesting candidate, so you ought to check this out. And I did, and they hired me. I was the first hire into Red Frame Lab. So what I couldn't do in education consulting was work directly with students, and Red Frame Lab lets me do that. So I love doing that, and I also get to scratch the education itch by being the assistant marching band director for the Granville High School. So I get to be a teacher, I get to be a little bit of a teacher here in Red Frame Lab, and I don't have to grade anything, which is awesome and makes faculty jealous. So that's kind of my story. I always wanted to be a teacher, always wanted to figure out how to do it, and I found some doors to walk through to try it. I am most interested in students coming out of a Red Frame Lab program with confidence. One of my favorite responses of a student at the end of a program is to say, oh, so that's what that's like. When we have, they participate in creating their own business, or they participate in a consulting project for RedCore or for Denison Consulting, it's meant to be designed so that they get a sense of what that real world is like when you have teammates you haven't worked with before, a client you haven't worked with before, solving a kind of a squishy problem that isn't obvious, and there are many, many different answers. We want them to try it, to learn it, to have the tools, to use the tools, and to decide when they're done, okay, I have a sense of how to do that. And if anybody ever gives me a challenge like that again, I know what to do. And that means they're ready for their internships, they're ready for their jobs. That's the thing I want them to get when they leave the Red Frame Lab.